Hey everyone, Mango7Roll here. How we doing today? Welcome to another episode of Epic 7 where I part my hair the wrong way and it goes everywhere. And today we're talking about this balance adjustment preview. And usually I will read this together with you for the first time, but it's been a while and I have seen this already and I've got a lot to say about it. A lot good, a lot bad, perhaps mostly bad. Just want to upfront say I'm trying not to be negative, but there's certain things that are frustrating and I get frustrated and people get frustrated. So yeah, so let's just take that into consideration first here and take a look at the units that were changed. So our lineup is Faithless Litika, Holiday Yufine, Ervalen, Senya, Great Chief Kiwana, Rickarus, Yunryung, and Ervalen. So yeah, and we also have Elentinox Wrath and Double-Edged Crescent. So let's take a look at units. First off is Faithless Litika. So to be upfront, I have not used Faithless Litika before. I'm not really familiar with how she flows in a PvP environment. From what I understand, the problems with her are not really necessarily her kit, but are more so her base speed is just not comparable to anything in the game right now, right? I think she's like 109 or 110. You just can't compete with anything else as an opener anymore, right? So we have Larkspur here, which is binds all enemies with a sword, and this is the one where all allies get 5% per target. So now this is changed to dispelling an additional buff on a critical hit, which is good. Damage dealt increase, we don't know how by how much, but that's good as well. And then the combat readiness is changed to this instead. Now I'm sure the order of operations here in terms of which skill has the combat readiness makes a difference, but again, I'm not fully familiar with this. If any Faithless Litika users in the comments down there below want to clarify, let me know. And what they say here is Faithless Litika's skill Larkspur has been used to dispel the enemy's buffs and then quickly use Hysteria to take advantage of early in the battle. However, she was neutralized if she did not get the desired results from the first attack. With these adjustments, the skill effect of increasing the combat readiness in her Larkspur will be transferred to the skill Hysteria. The combat readiness will be slightly increased by a fixed value. That's true, that's true. It's not 5% per target, it's just 25% now, right? Another buff decrease and everything like that too. Cool. And then we get Holiday Yufine, and this one's a weird one for me. I really like this change, but I also really dislike this change as well. So this increases the damage done of just one bite. Cool. Then we have Let's Eat Together. This changes, so it makes her more evasive unconditionally, if that makes sense. So 35% base instead of 20%, and then she gets an additional 35%, totaling to the same 70% as she did before, but she gets 35% up front now instead of 20, which is obviously fantastic. Here's the part I'm not really sure about. So previously she gave herself greater attack for 2 turns, which really helped her use builds like the burn build. I forget the name of the artifact. Just anything with lots of attack and lets her buff herself, right? And now she's losing that attack buff, and instead she's increasing the attack of the entire team for 2 turns instead. And this may be a buff, this may be a nerf depending on how useful this greater attack buff was versus this regular attack. But what I can say is that it feels like so many units have attack buff now. So anybody who has attack buff previously that was kind of special to them, somebody like Araminta that has attack buff, it feels like just so many people have it now and bring it to the table, especially on fire units. It feels that it's becoming a lot samey in terms of that, and I really liked the uniqueness of greater here instead of the just regular AoE attack buff. So I'm not sure what to think about this. Not much to say about this other than this change is pretty solid. It makes her more consistent. So what does it say here? Dispel debuffs, combat readiness, yeah. Her skill will be changed to increase the attack of all allies to support all allies. Since greater attack is changed to increase attack, the damage dealt is increased. Yeah, this is true, this is true. It's the same overall, yeah, exactly. So through these changes, we'll be able to support allies better. I mean, maybe, yeah, you're probably right there, but not really enough, especially when there's problematic units in the game that directly cause her problems, like Rem, for example. Then we have the big one. Okay, so this one, this is one it's tough. This is Ervalen, and Ervalen's not everybody's favorite character, but he's a lot of people's favorite characters, especially since there's very few characters that fit this style in the game. I really like Ervalen. I have Ervalen Molagorod quite heavily, I think, as well, and I'm not using him currently, but I've definitely brought him out in the past and had some fun with him. So they're doing a couple things here. First off, they're changing his soul burn to affect chance to 100% on his defense down, and next up, they're completely changing his identity. So instead of when the enemy's health is greater than the caster's max health, combat readiness, blah, blah, blah. Instead of that, now it just attacks the enemy. I guess I should read this one here. Increases the attack of the caster for 2 turns, and when the target is an elite or boss monster, grants an extra turn to the caster. So they're basically turning him from a single target PvP nuke to a PvE only nuke, which is very odd to me. And of course, the cooldown is going up to 4 turns instead of 2 turns, and the damage dealt is decreasing in green, which is hilarious. Now we have Heir to the Throne, and this increases the attack of the with the sword, granting increased speed, so he no longer counterattacks, which was the entirety of his kit, right? Like, he was a counterattacking thief. Like, that's what he did. It's what he did in the story. It's what he does from his character design. He's a parrying thief. He's a fencer. It just makes sense. But now he's not counterattacking anymore. He's just granting increased speed and barrier to the caster, and damage dealt decreased in green. So this is a baffling one to me. There was absolutely no need for this, and on top of that, it's another Earth unit that's going to be used for PvE. Like, we have Ort that could be used. We have Sid with defense down on his skill 1 as well, which already people have Molagorod. We have so many different units we could use instead of this. And Ervalen was originally designed to deal high damage to enemies whose maximum health was greater than his. However, he lacked any distinguishing strength compared to other heroes. Therefore, adjustments will be made so that he can play a more active and aggressive role against powerful enemies such as elite and boss monsters. His skill, Sword of Hatred, is changed to grant an extra turn when the target is an elite or boss monster, allowing him to use their skill, Heir to the Throne, right after. His AI will also be changed to prioritize the Skill of Hatred first. His skills will increase attack and speed instead of granting immunity and adopting a counter-attacking stance. Accordingly, his soul burn effect is changed to increase the effectiveness of the skill, to decrease enemies' defense more efficiently, as his utility will increase with these adjustments. Each of these will now have decreased damage dealt and cooldown. Yeah, so this is brutal to me. This is just nonsensical, honestly. To change a unit from PvP to PvE is insane to me. Like, especially when they say he lacked a distinguishing strength. Like, then make his strength better. Find a way to make his distinguishing strength better, you know? Instead of completely gutting him and changing him into something else. The other thing here is as well, the other thing here is, what was I gonna say here? His soul burn. This is another thing, just a little minor thing that kind of bothers me. This increases the effect chance to 100% with his defense down, but you're not going to have effectiveness on here, so this soul burn is just basically going to have 100% chance to get resisted when you try to use his defense down for a lot of bosses. I really think they need to rethink how these soul burns work, especially if you're going to make a unit PvE. Maybe make this ignores ER as well. Just a minor gripe. But yeah, this is really frustrating to me. And I can understand people being very upset for this. Then we have Senya. Senya is one of the ones who actually got something good at this time around. So instead of a random buff with her Indomitable Spirit, her passive, now she's going to grant a barrier to all allies and increase the speed of the caster, and speed is very, very good. And the barrier strength is increased proportionate to the caster's attack, which is also going to be fantastic. On top of that, her Dragon Slayer's Strike now has a 100%, I think, chance to provoke. I'm not sure after skill ups, maybe only 85% for 1 turn. And a 3-turn counterattack stance. So this is fantastic. Absolutely love these changes here. And Senya will be adjusted to eliminate the uncertainty of the Grace of Battle activated from her passive skill. Yeah, this is great. This is great. Senya players rejoice. This is the best part of this patch, in my opinion. Well, maybe the best, maybe second best, depending on the artifacts. So then we have the exclusive equipment increases Grace of the Battle barrier strength. Now this barrier might be massive, But I feel like that's not going to be the one I go for. I forget what our other ones are, but there's so much unable to be buffed. Barrier is brutal right now. The other one increases greater attack for 3 turns, which is fantastic. So what a change to Senya. I think this is fantastic. Really, really happy with this change. Something like this is great. I think she still just dies to Huayang, but that's every unit in the game. And then Great Chief Kiwana, somebody I was really excited to see on the balance patch list. I have her Mola Gourd. I really like using her. And they basically did nothing. So what they did is instead of making her have to proc her passive 5 times to get that 75%, now it only has to proc 3 times to get 75%. This is obviously a buff, but it does literally nothing. Anybody who already had a successful, or anybody who is already using Great Chief Kiwana or plan to use Great Chief Kiwana, this doesn't really change anything, right? Like, this maybe makes you run like 5-10 seconds faster tops, but it changes like nothing. It doesn't change your ability to do the dungeon. It doesn't change anything. So this is another one that just doesn't make sense to me. Granted, it makes sense to change this, but to have it take up a balance patch slot is not ideal. Then we have Ricorous, and again, Ricorous is somebody I don't use, but I've heard that this is not the best change either. It seemed like it changed him from a support unit, which a lot of people used him as, to a PvP, or not a PvE, but a damagey unit, which just didn't make sense to people. So now it decreases buff durations of all allies for 2 turns, and attacks enemies with a spear with an 80% chance to decrease speed and restrict. So instead of PvP, we are now PvEing again, right? So this changes from a PvP unit to a PvE unit, which could be good, you know. I'm not saying this is good or bad, but the fact that they're changing identity again is not something I super love. Because I know a lot of people did use Ricorous. He was a decent unit, and you have to remember, like, yeah, there's units like Huayang, there's units like Arabi, there's units like Lilius, there's all those units that we see in the top level play 24/7. But you also have to remember the rest of the players that play the game, that just have fun with units they like, right? There's a lot of those players, and especially somebody easily obtainable like Ricorous, it's just tough. So Yunring here is another person that does lose their speed buff, which doesn't make sense to me, and now gets attack again. So another unit that gives attack to all teammates, and actually it's all allies, and immunity for 2 turns, but it also decreases buff duration. So this is obviously a pretty sweet change with this buff duration, but losing increased speed is like the entirety of, like, that's such a good buff now. Just so many more people increase attack. I don't really have much else to say with this. I feel like Yunring wasn't used at all. Is there a reason you just don't keep increased speed? I don't really understand that. Or even give her speed and attack, right? Like, give her speed and attack, she's still not necessarily used too much, right? So stuff like that just doesn't make sense to me. We then have Ervalen here. Damage dealt increase, don't worry. It's in green. So we've got 75% chance each to dispel 2 buffs. So what this does is makes it so you have 2 checks to dispel 2 buffs instead of 1 check to dispel 2 buffs. This is great. Or one check to dispel 2 buffs versus 2 checks to dispel 1 buff each, I believe, which is fantastic. Soul Burn increases effect chance to 100%. Again, this is one of those problems where without increased effect or ignores effect resistance, this is just going to miss most of the time. Just a thing I have to mention. It's kind of like a mini pet peeve of mine, I guess. Then we have Escort here as well, which is great. So at the start of the battle, grants Escort to the caster for 1 turn. After an ally, except for the caster's attack, suffers a single attack, increases CR of the caster by 10%. Cool. Attack scaling decreased, health scaling increased on both abilities as well, which is great. Also grants a barrier to all allies, barrier strength, and proportionate to max HP. These are all good changes, I believe. But we did lose our effect resistant stun, you know? Like, that's kind of important, but it's just a change. That doesn't seem to make too much of a difference and has like a downside and an upside. I feel like they do that a lot with units that aren't very good. They give them like a minor upside, but also give them a minor downside. So yeah. Then we have Elentinox Wrath, and don't get me wrong, Elentinox Wrath is a good artifact. 15% crit rate now, and activating an extra attack on the caster's turn increases CR by 10 to 20%. That's fantastic. but they changed it again. So this is an artifact a lot of people use to cap their crit rate. So they put it on somebody who has like 60, 65, 70% crit rate to make it so they can then use them, especially in PvE scenarios, and bring that character up to 100% crit rate. Now, they can't do that. So they have to actually change the artifact they're using. Actually, they can't even change the artifact. They now have to change their gear set, because 15% will not get them up to even like 90%, 85% anymore. So that's kind of interesting they chose to do this, because to me, these look like two entirely different artifacts to me. Two entirely different artifacts. Like, I feel like this could have easily been just a new artifact, you know? Because this was a super interesting artifact that you happen to use on units you just couldn't get the right stats on. Again, don't get me wrong, this is good. These are good stats. This is a good artifact. It's just changing an artifact that people were already using when they could have just made a new one. And then Double-Edged Crescent, which now is OP, increases evasion by 20%, and after successfully evasion has a 15 to 30% chance to counterattack. Insane artifact, and it's going to be just insane on a ton of different thieves like Rylot. So yeah, these are the balance patch notes. I don't have too much more to say. I'm a little bit upset, as always, which it seems to be with these balance patches. And what I'm looking for balance patches is, 1, changes to the meta. I see 0 changes to the meta here, literally 0. Faithless Lidica, that's not changing anything. Holiday Euphine, that's not changing anything. Ervalen, that's not changing anything. Senya, I don't think it's a big enough change to save anything, especially considering she just gets blasted. And the others do nothing as well, right? So there's literally no shakeup. There's no new unit here that makes you want to try them out, right? Like, there's not a T-Surin change. There's not a Ken change even though it wasn't a great change. It was something people wanted to try out. There's no draw from this balance patch that makes people want to try something out. Yeah. And the only thing that seems like I really want to experiment with is actually Double-Edged Crescent, to see what some of these new thief characters are going to be like when they can try to mimic Violet. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe as always, and I'll talk to you later. Bye, everybody.